From the moment it was built, the white mansion with its towering columns and tinted glass windows seemed more like a magazine cover than a home. The sprawling estate, nestled in the exclusive hills of Greenwich, Connecticut, was a testament to the power and wealth of its owner, Jackson Pierce. Every inch of the property was maintained with surgical precision, all under the watchful eye of the self-made tech mogul who had amassed his fortune through aggressive investments and strategic acquisitions of struggling startups. For Jackson, discipline wasn't just a virtue, it was the only path to success. Any deviation, any hesitation, was interpreted as weakness, and weakness, even from a child, was unacceptable. His only daughter, Lily, just 3 years old, with watchful eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond her years, was raised with rigidity and silence. She learned quickly not to disturb, not to err, not to show emotion. The household staff moved through the mansion like ghosts, careful not to make unnecessary noise or draw attention to themselves. They knew the consequences of displeasing Mr. Pierce. On a crisp autumn morning during breakfast, little Lily refused the scrambled eggs prepared by one of the housekeepers. She whispered, barely audible, that she preferred oatmeal instead. Jackson, who was on a call with foreign investors, abruptly interrupted his conversation. Without raising his voice, he never needed to, he hurled the plate to the floor, shattering the fine china on the marble. He looked directly into his daughter's eyes and with a cold, measured tone commanded, "Take her to the kennel wing. Let her learn not to make demands." The kennel wing was feared by everyone in the household. 3 Belgian Malinois, trained for security and obedience, occupied that space. As Lily was led there, she didn't cry. Her eyes remained fixed, eerily calm. The door was locked. For 4 hours, nothing was heard. Not a bark, not a whimper. Only silence. Margaret, the head housekeeper who had served the Pierce family since before Lily was born, finally convinced Jackson to open the kennel wing, fearing the worst. What they discovered left them paralyzed. The dogs were lying around the little girl in a protective circle as if guarding her. One of them had its head resting on her lap. Lily was whispering something no one could understand, her eyes half closed as if in a trance. The scene, silent and heavy with unspoken meaning, would never be forgotten. News of what happened in the kennel wing spread among the staff. They began to look at Lily differently. They whispered that she had inherited her mother's gift, a woman who had mysteriously vanished years before after a final confrontation with Jackson. Others believed in something deeper, a rare sensitivity, a connection that defied logic. "She's just like her mother," Margaret whispered to Caroline, the newly hired nanny, as they watched Lily sitting alone in the garden, surrounded by butterflies that seemed to dance at her command. "They have the same old soul eyes." Caroline nodded, observing the child with professional interest. Unlike the other staff, Caroline didn't seem afraid of Jackson. She maintained a quiet dignity that bordered on defiance. What no one knew was that Caroline Davis wasn't just any nanny. With her carefully constructed resume and impeccable references, she had secured a position in one of the most tightly controlled households in New England. "What happened to her mother?" Caroline asked, keeping her voice low. Margaret glanced around nervously. "Officially, she left. Walked out one night after a terrible argument, but..." She leaned closer. "Some of us think something worse happened. Mr. Pierce said she abandoned them, couldn't handle the pressure of their lifestyle. But Eleanor loved that child more than life itself. She would never leave Lily behind willingly." Jackson, unsettled by what he had witnessed in the kennel, spent days reviewing security camera footage. He consulted specialists, trainers, neurologists. No one could explain what he had seen. It destabilized him, challenged the perfect order he had created. His control over his world was slipping, and nothing frightened Jackson Pierce more than losing control. That night, after Lily had been put to bed, Jackson summoned Caroline to his study. The room, with its dark wood paneling and leather-bound books that had never been read, was designed to intimidate. "Tell me about your background with children," he demanded, studying her face for any sign of deception. Caroline met his gaze steadily. "I believe children thrive with structure, but also need emotional connection. My approach balances discipline with nurturing." Jackson's lips thinned. "My daughter doesn't need coddling. She needs to learn how the world works. Strength is rewarded, weakness is punished. With all due respect, Mr. Pierce, fear isn't respect. A child who fears you will never trust you. His eyes narrowed. You're overstepping, Ms. Davis. You hired me for my expertise, I'm simply offering it. Their standoff was interrupted by a small sound at the door. Lily stood there in her white nightgown, her dark hair framing her pale face. I had a dream. About Mommy, she said softly. Jackson's expression hardened. Go back to bed, Lily, now. But the child continued, her voice taking on an unsettling quality that made the hair on Caroline's arms stand up. She was on a white horse. She said she's coming back for me. Jackson stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Enough! Take her back to her room, Ms. Davis, and ensure she understands that we don't speak of her mother in this house. As Caroline led Lily back to her bedroom, the child whispered, The dogs told me secrets about Daddy. Bad secrets. Caroline knelt to eye level with the girl. What kind of secrets, Lily? But the child only shook her head, suddenly afraid. I can't say. He'll put me back with the dogs. Did the dogs hurt you? Caroline asked, keeping her voice gentle. Lily's response chilled her. No, they protected me. They said Mommy sent them to watch over me until she comes back. In her room, Caroline took out her phone and sent a brief encrypted message. Situation worse than reported. Child shows signs of emotional abuse and possibly inherited her mother's sensitivity. Need to accelerate timeline. The response came immediately. Proceed with caution. Pierce has powerful friends. Gather evidence. Meanwhile, Jackson sat in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the portrait of Eleanor that still hung on the wall, despite his multiple orders to have it removed. In it, his wife stood beside a white horse, her hand extended as if offering something to the viewer. Her eyes, the same unusual eyes that Lily had inherited, seemed to follow him accusingly around the room. You can't have her, he whispered. To the painting. She's mine now. Outside his window, a storm was gathering. The wind picked up, rattling the glass. For a moment, Jackson thought he heard the distant sound of hoofbeats, but he dismissed it as thunder. He didn't notice the white figure that briefly appeared at the edge of his property. A woman on horseback, watching the mansion with patient, determined eyes. Nor did he see Caroline standing at her bedroom window, taking a photograph of the apparition before it vanished into the mist. The following morning, the Pierce mansion was unnaturally quiet. The staff moved with heightened caution, aware that something had shifted in the delicate balance of power that governed their world. Margaret found Caroline in the kitchen, preparing Lily's breakfast. Oatmeal with honey and sliced strawberries, not the protein-heavy meal Jackson had insisted upon. You're playing a dangerous game, Margaret warned, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Pierce doesn't tolerate anyone changing his systems. Caroline arranged the food carefully on the child-sized china plate. He hired me to care for his daughter. That's what I'm doing. She paused, then added, Have you ever wondered why he's so afraid of her connection to her mother? Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she wiped down the already spotless counter. Eleanor was different. She had ways of knowing things, seeing things. The locals in town used to talk. Some called her a witch, but it wasn't like that. She just understood things on a level most people don't. And Lily inherited this gift? Margaret nodded. But Mr. Pierce, he sees it as a threat. After what happened with the dogs, he's been watching her even more closely. Caroline carried the breakfast tray upstairs, her mind racing with new information. In Lily's room, the child was already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed, drawing with intense concentration. Good morning, Lily. I brought your favorite. Breakfast? The girl didn't look up. Thank you, Miss Caroline. Did you see my mommy last night? Caroline set the tray down carefully. What do you mean, sweetheart? On the white horse, at the edge of the trees. She comes sometimes, but only when Daddy isn't looking. Caroline sat beside her on the bed. Lily, can I see what you're drawing? The child handed over her sketch pad. On the page was a surprisingly detailed drawing of a woman on horseback, her long hair flowing behind her, standing at the edge of a forest. In the background loomed the unmistakable silhouette of the Pierce mansion. She's beautiful, Caroline said softly. That's my mommy. She didn't leave me. Daddy locked her out. Caroline felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean, sweetie? He changed all the locks after they fought. He told everyone she left, but she couldn't get back in. Lily's eyes met Caroline's, ancient and knowing. She tried to take me with her, but Daddy caught her. That's when he took away her horse and locked the gates. From the doorway came Jackson's cold voice. Filling my daughter's head with fantasies, Ms. Davis. He stood there in his impeccable suit, not a hair out of place, his expression unreadable. She was simply showing me her artwork, Caroline replied, holding his gaze. Jackson entered the room and took the sketchbook from Caroline's hands. He flipped through it, his jaw tightening at the recurring image of the woman on the white horse. Lily, these drawings need to stop. Your mother abandoned us. These fantasies are unhealthy. The little girl's face remained impassive, but Caroline noticed her small hands curling into fists beneath the covers. Yes, Daddy, she said mechanically. Good. Now, I have meetings in the city today. Ms. Davis, ensure that Lily completes her language lessons and piano practice. No outdoor time until her tasks are finished. After he left, Caroline helped Lily eat her breakfast. Your father seems very concerned about your drawings, she said carefully. Lily took a small bite of oatmeal. He burned all the pictures of Mommy, but I remember what she looks like. She leaned closer to Caroline and whispered, I hear her in my dreams. She says help is coming. Later that morning, while supervising Lily's French lesson, Caroline discreetly examined the child's bedroom. Behind the perfectly arranged stuffed animals and books, she found a loose panel in the wall. Inside was a small collection of treasures, a silver locket with a tiny photograph of Eleanor Pierce, a worn ribbon that might have belonged to a horse's mane, and a folded note in elegant handwriting that read, My darling Lily, remember that love finds a way. Trust the animals. They will guide you. Stay strong until I return. Mommy. Caroline photographed the items carefully before replacing them exactly as she'd found them. During Lily's piano practice, she slipped away to the west wing of the mansion, where Jackson kept his home office. The door was locked, but Caroline produced a small tool from her pocket and had it open in seconds, a skill not typically found in a nanny's repertoire. Inside, she quickly accessed his computer. Years of experience had taught her how to bypass basic security measures, and within minutes, she was downloading files onto a secure drive disguised as a lipstick tube. What she found confirmed her suspicions. Legal documents showing that Eleanor Pierce had never officially been declared missing, financial records indicating that Jackson had frozen all her accounts the day of their final argument, and most disturbingly, surveillance footage of the night Eleanor supposedly left, showing her being forcibly removed from the property by Jackson's security team as she fought to reach her daughter. Caroline's hands shook as she backed up the files. This wasn't just emotional abuse. This was something far more sinister. A man so obsessed with control that he had effectively erased his wife from existence rather than lose her. A sound in the hallway made her freeze. Quickly closing everything and returning the computer to its previous state, she slipped out of the office and nearly collided with Brooks, Jackson's personal assistant. The man's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Ms. Davis, this area is restricted to household staff. Caroline smiled apologetically. I was looking for Mr. Pierce. Lily is having trouble with her piano exercises, and I wanted his guidance on whether to extend her practice time. Brooks studied her face. Mr. Pierce is in Manhattan until this evening. I suggest you follow the schedule he provided without deviation. His tone made it clear he didn't believe her excuse. Of course, my apologies. As she turned to leave, Brooks added, Mr. Pierce values loyalty above all else, Ms. Davis. It would be unfortunate if he began to question yours. The threat hung in the air between them. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Caroline made her way to the gatehouse where Robert, the elderly groundskeeper, lived. Unlike the other staff, Robert had been with the estate since before Jackson purchased it. His loyalty seemed to be to the land itself rather than its current owner. Ms. Davis, he greeted her with surprise. It's late for a social call. I need to ask you about Eleanor Pierce, she said, without preamble. The old man's expression shuttered. That's dangerous talk around here. Please, it's important. Robert sighed heavily and invited her inside. His small quarters were cluttered but warm, the walls adorned with photographs of the estate through different seasons. Mrs. Pierce was special, he said finally, after pouring them each a cup of tea. Had a way with animals that wasn't natural, the horses especially. That white stallion of hers, Phantom, would follow her anywhere. What happened the night she disappeared? Robert's hands trembled slightly. There was a terrible fight. Mr. Pierce had discovered she was planning to leave him, take little Miss Lily with her. He went cold, not angry, not shouting. That would have been better. He just turned to ice. The old man looked into his tea as if seeing the events replay there. He ordered security to remove her from the property. When she fought to get to the nursery, to Lily, they dragged her out. I heard her screaming that he couldn't keep her child from her, that she'd return. The next day he told everyone she'd abandoned them, couldn't handle the pressures of their life. And no one questioned this? Robert looked up sharply. You think we didn't? But who would believe us against Jackson Pierce? The police chief plays golf with him. His company employs half the town, and there was no evidence of foul play. She walked out alive. And Phantom, the white horse, disappeared the same night. Mr. Pierce ordered the stables emptied, claimed horses were too dangerous to keep around a small child. Carolyn leaned forward. Robert, have you ever seen a woman on a white horse at the edge of the property? The old man's face paled. You've seen her too? I thought I was going senile. He lowered his voice. She comes at dusk sometimes, just watching. I tried approaching once, but she vanished into the trees. As Caroline walked back to the main house, her phone vibrated with an encrypted message. Timeline accelerated. Extraction. In 48 hours. Prepare the child. She looked up at Lily's bedroom window and saw the small figure standing there watching her. Even from a distance, Caroline could feel those old soul eyes waiting and knowing. Inside the mansion, Brooks watched Caroline from a darkened window. He reached for his phone and dialed Jackson's private number. Sir, I believe we have a problem with the new nanny. She's been asking questions about Mrs. Pierce. Miles away in his Manhattan penthouse, Jackson Pierce set down his whiskey glass, his reflection in the window showing a man whose perfect facade was beginning to crack. Keep her under surveillance. I'll handle this personally when I return. Tomorrow. He ended the call and turned to the woman sitting across from him, Dr. Vivian Reese, a renowned child psychiatrist known for her controversial methods of treating children with behavioral abnormalities. Tell me again about this condition you believe my daughter has, he said. Dr. Reese's smile didn't reach her eyes. Based on your description, Lily exhibits signs of inherited paraphrenia, a rare condition passed down from her mother. The animal empathy, the vivid hallucinations, the belief that her mother communicates with her. These are all symptoms. With my residential treatment program, we can correct these tendencies before they become permanently established. Jackson nodded slowly. And it's completely confidential. Absolutely. Our facility in Vermont is very private. No one will know. She's there. We can begin treatment as soon as you bring her to us. What neither of them knew was that their conversation was being recorded by the smartwatch Jackson wore, a gift from a technology partner, modified by people with a vested interest in Lily's welfare. And as the recording transmitted to a secure server, the pieces of a plan years in the making began to fall into place. Dawn broke over the Pierce estate with an unnatural stillness. The security guards making their rounds noticed nothing amiss, as fog crept across the manicured lawns, obscuring the boundaries between the cultivated gardens and the wild forest beyond. Inside the mansion, Margaret was the first to realize something was wrong. When she went to wake Lily for her morning routine, the child's bed was empty, still made from the night before. She checked the bathroom, the play area, even under the bed, places a small child might hide. Nothing. Her heart racing, she hurried to Caroline's quarters, only to find that door standing open, the room meticulously cleaned out as if no one had ever occupied it. The nanny had vanished along with her young charge. When Jackson Pierce received the call, he was still in Manhattan, preparing to return to Connecticut with Dr. Reese. His reaction was not what anyone expected. Instead of panic or rage, a cold, calculated focus took over. Lock down the property. Check the security footage. No one speaks to anyone outside the household. He ended the call and turned to Dr. Reese. We need to accelerate our plans. My daughter has been taken. The doctor's eyebrows rose. By whom? By someone who will regret it, Jackson replied, already dialing another number. I need your team at my estate, now. Full surveillance and retrieval protocol. Within hours, the Pierce mansion was transformed into a command center. Private security experts combed through footage, examined every inch of the property, and established roadblocks on surrounding roads. What they found only deepened the mystery. The security system had recorded nothing unusual. No alarms had been triggered. The cameras showed empty hallways and rooms all night. It was as if Lily and Caroline had simply evaporated. Jackson reviewed the footage himself, his expression growing more strained with each passing hour. This is impossible, he muttered. The system is state-of-the-art. Nothing moves on this property without being recorded. Brooks, hovering nearby, cleared his throat. Sir, there is one blind spot. The old service tunnel that runs beneath the east wing. It was sealed off during renovations, but Jackson's head snapped up. Show me. The tunnel, a remnant from the estate's earlier days, had indeed been sealed, with a concrete wall during Jackson's extensive renovations 5 years earlier. But when security broke through the barrier, they found fresh footprints in the dust leading away from the house. The passage emerged in the woods, half a mile from the main gate, completely bypassing the elaborate security perimeter. Meanwhile, 50 miles away in a small farmhouse in rural Vermont, Caroline gently helped Lily out of the back of a nondescript van. The child had not spoken since they'd left the mansion, her eyes wide and watchful. Are we safe now? She finally whispered, as Caroline led her into the warmth of the kitchen. A woman rose from the table to greet them. She was in her early 40s, with streaks of silver in her dark hair and the same unusual eyes as Lily. For a moment, both stood frozen, staring at each other. Then Lily broke into a run, flinging herself into the woman's open arms. Mommy! Eleanor Pierce held her daughter tightly, tears streaming down her face. My baby, my precious girl. Caroline watched the reunion with professional satisfaction, though her emotions threatened to overwhelm her training. This moment, this was why she did this work. After giving mother and daughter a few minutes alone, she joined them at the kitchen table. We need to move quickly, she said. Jackson will have already discovered you're gone and activated his resources. Eleanor nodded, gently stroking Lily's hair. The safe house in the Adirondacks is ready. We'll leave at nightfall. The documentation is complete, Caroline confirmed. Your new identities are established. The legal team is prepared to move as soon as we're secured. What about the evidence? Caroline patted her bag. All here. Financial records, surveillance footage, witness statements, including Robert's testimony about the night you were forced out, plus medical documentation of Lily's emotional state and your psychological evaluation, showing no signs of the instability Jackson claimed. Eleanor's expression hardened. He told everyone I abandoned her, that I was unstable, dangerous. We know the truth now, Caroline assured her, and soon so will the courts. Lily, nestled against her mother's side, looked up. The dogs told me you would come back. They said you were watching over me. Eleanor smiled through her tears. I never left you, not really. I've been fighting to get back to you every day. What will happen to the dogs? Lily asked suddenly. Daddy will be angry with them for helping me. Don't worry about them, Caroline said. They're being taken care of. What she didn't say was that the Belgian Malinois had already been removed from the property by members of her network, the same underground group that had helped Eleanor rebuild her life after being forcibly separated from her child. By nightfall, the story of Lily's disappearance had spread throughout Greenwich and beyond. Jackson Pierce, leveraging his connections, ensured that it dominated local news. Beloved child kidnapped by deranged nanny, read the headlines. Security camera images of Caroline, carefully selected to make her appear suspicious, were broadcast on every channel. A substantial reward was offered for information leading to their recovery. What the news didn't report was that Jackson had refused police involvement, insisting on handling the search privately, a detail that raised eyebrows among those who knew how these situations typically unfolded. In a hotel room 30 miles from the farmhouse, Richard Calloway, Eleanor's attorney, watched the coverage with a grim expression. "He's playing this exactly as we anticipated," he told his associate, "making it about a kidnapping rather than a rescue." "Do we proceed with filing?" his colleague asked. Richard nodded. Tomorrow morning, the sealed family court petition goes in first, followed by the emergency custody hearing request. By the time Pierce realizes what's happening, we'll have presented our evidence to a judge. Back at the Pierce estate, Jackson's team had made a discovery. A technician had recovered deleted footage from a server backup, a 3-second clip of Caroline standing at the edge of Lily's bed, checking her watch at precisely 2:17 a.m. She knew where the cameras were, the technician explained. She used a localized EMP device to create a blind spot around her movements, military grade. This woman isn't a typical nanny. Jackson's expression darkened. Find out who she really is. Within hours, they had a partial answer. Caroline Davis doesn't exist, Brooks reported. The credentials, references, background, all fabricated, but facial recognition gave us a hit. He handed Jackson a tablet. Dr. Caroline Bennett, former child psychologist specializing in trauma, lost her license 3 years ago after a controversial case involving a custody dispute. She claimed a prominent father was abusing his child, but couldn't prove it. The father sued, won, and she was discredited. Jackson studied the image. Find her, use whatever resources necessary. His phone rang, a secure line used only by his most trusted associates. "Pierce." The voice on the other end was tense. "We have a problem. A photo is circulating on social media. A woman on a white horse with a child. It was taken yesterday, on a rural road in Vermont." Jackson's blood ran cold. "Send it to me." The image appeared on his screen seconds later. Though slightly blurred, there was no mistaking the woman's profile. The distinctive white horse or the small child held protectively in her arms. Most damning of all was the silver pendant, clearly visible around the woman's neck, a custom piece Jackson had commissioned for Eleanor on their first anniversary. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "She can't be." But he knew. Somehow, against all odds and despite all his precautions, Eleanor had returned, and she had reclaimed their daughter. The revelation sent him into a controlled fury. He summoned his legal team immediately. "I want my daughter back, whatever it takes. Whoever stands in my way will be destroyed." Miles away, Eleanor looked up sharply from where she sat with Lily. "He knows," she said simply. Caroline, packing essentials for their journey, paused. "How can you tell?" "I can feel it. His rage. It's like a storm building." She pulled Lily closer. "We need to leave now." They abandoned their plan to wait until darkness, instead loading quickly into a different vehicle, a weathered pickup truck that would attract no attention on rural roads. As they pulled away from the farmhouse, Lily pressed her face to the window, watching the landscape float past. "Daddy's very angry," she said matter-of-factly, "but he can't hurt us anymore." Eleanor exchanged a glance with Caroline in the rear-view mirror. "No, sweetheart. He can't hurt us anymore." What none of them realized was that their escape route had been compromised. In his rage, Jackson had activated resources that went beyond private security, former intelligence operatives who specialized in extractions and had access to surveillance technologies not available to civilians. A satellite was already tracking their vehicle's movement through rural Vermont. "Sir, we have a location," Brooks reported. "A farmhouse registered to a Sarah Jenkins, property purchased 3 years ago. Neighbors report rarely seeing her, but occasionally spotting a white horse in the pasture." Jackson's lips curved in a cold smile. "Send the team, bring my daughter back." "And the others?" Brooks asked carefully. Jackson's expression revealed nothing. "Handle it." The extraction team was 20 minutes from the farmhouse when their target suddenly changed direction, turning onto an unmarked forest road that didn't appear on their GPS. "They're deviating from the expected route," the team leader reported. "Possible counter-surveillance measures. Request satellite repositioning." but the dense forest canopy obscured their view, and by the time they reached the location where the truck should have been, they found only empty road. Meanwhile, on a different road entirely, Caroline handed Eleanor a satellite phone. "Make the call, now." Eleanor dialed a number she had memorized years ago. When it connected, she spoke just 2 words: "Mockingbird active." Within minutes, news alerts began pinging on phones across the country. The story that had been carefully prepared and positioned with select journalists was breaking. Tech mogul's missing wife returns, claims she was forced from home, separated from child. Accompanying the story was a photograph of Eleanor from 3 years earlier, her face bruised, documenting the night she was removed from her home. The image had been held in trust by her attorney, to be released only when she gave the signal. Also included was a copy of the sealed court filing, a comprehensive legal case against Jackson Pierce, including allegations of emotional abuse, unlawful restraint, and conspiracy to commit fraud by falsely claiming his wife had abandoned their child. The media firestorm was immediate and overwhelming. Journalists descended on the Pierce estate, former employees came forward with corroborating stories, and Jackson's carefully constructed public image began to crumble. His phone rang constantly, board members, investors, partners all demanding explanations. Brooks watched his employer with growing concern as Jackson stood motionless in his study, staring at the news coverage. "Sir, your legal team is waiting for instructions." Jackson didn't seem to hear him. His focus was fixed on the television, where Eleanor's face filled the screen. She looked older, more weathered than when he'd last seen her, but her eyes, those same unusual eyes that had first captivated him, that their daughter had inherited, burned with quiet determination as she read a prepared statement. "For 3 years, I have fought to reunite with my daughter. Today that fight enters its final phase. I ask for privacy and understanding as we work through the legal system to ensure Lily's safety and well-being." Only when the broadcast cut away did Jackson seem to return to himself. "Prepare the jet," he ordered Brooks. "We're going to Vermont." "Sir, with all due respect, that might not be advisable given the current media situation." Jackson's voice cut like a blade. "My daughter has been taken from me by the woman who abandoned us. I will not stand by while Eleanor destroys everything I've built." What Jackson didn't know was that he was already too late. By the time his jet was cleared for takeoff, Eleanor, Caroline, and Lily had reached their destination, not the Adirondack safe house that had been compromised, but a secure location much closer to home. They were in a well-appointed apartment in Manhattan, less than 10 blocks from Jackson's own penthouse, hidden in plain sight under the protection of people who had been planning this moment for years. As night fell over the city, Lily stood at the window watching the lights of New York sparkle below. "Is this our new home?" she asked. Eleanor knelt beside her. "Just for a little while until the judge decides." "And then?" Eleanor brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Then we'll find a real home, with trees and space for Phantom to run. Would you like that?" Lily nodded solemnly. "And the dogs too?" "Yes, sweetheart, the dogs too." Caroline watched them from across the room, her professional demeanor finally giving way to exhaustion. Her part in this operation was nearly complete, but the most dangerous phase was just beginning. The legal battle ahead would test them all, bringing to light secrets that had been buried for years. And Jackson Pierce, a man unaccustomed to losing, would stop at nothing to maintain control of the narrative, and his daughter. Morning light filtered through the blinds of the Manhattan apartment as Eleanor prepared Lily for what would be the most challenging day of their reunited lives. The child sat patiently as her mother brushed her hair, both of them reflected in the bathroom mirror, 2 pairs of identical, unusual eyes, windows to souls that understood things others couldn't comprehend. "Will I have to see Daddy today?" Lily asked, her voice small but steady. Eleanor's hands paused momentarily before continuing the gentle strokes. "Yes, sweetheart, at the courthouse. But I'll be right there with you the whole time, and Miss Caroline and our lawyers. You won't be alone with him." The child nodded solemnly. "I'm not afraid of him anymore." Eleanor kissed the top of her daughter's head, blinking back tears. "You're the bravest person I know." In the living room, Caroline was coordinating with Richard Calloway and his legal team via secure video conference. The attorney's expression was grave as he updated them on developments. Pierce's team filed an emergency petition claiming parental kidnapping and demanding Lily's immediate return to his custody. Judge Harmon denied it pending today's hearing, which has infuriated him. "How are the media responding?" Caroline asked. Richard's grim expression softened slightly. "Better than we anticipated. The image of Eleanor on the white horse with Lily has gone viral. It's being called The Rescue on social media. Public sentiment is overwhelmingly supportive, especially after former household staff began corroborating Eleanor's account of being forcibly removed from her home." And Jackson? He's on the defensive for perhaps the first time in his life. Several board members of Pierce Technologies have called for an emergency meeting. 2 major investors have publicly distanced themselves from him. His reputation is taking hits from all sides. Caroline nodded, satisfied. "And the psychological evaluation results?" Dr. Montgomery's assessment of Lily shows clear signs of emotional manipulation and fear-based compliance consistent with psychological control tactics. She's submitting her full report to the court this morning. Pierce's team will try to discredit it, of course, but her reputation is unimpeachable. The door to Lily's bedroom opened, and Eleanor emerged with the child, both dressed in simple but elegant outfits that Caroline had arranged to have delivered. Lily looked older somehow, more present than she had in the oppressive atmosphere of her father's mansion. "We're ready," Eleanor said, though her voice carried the faintest tremor. The journey to the courthouse was meticulously planned. Rather than using a private vehicle that might be tracked, they traveled in a court officer's SUV with tinted windows, escorted by 2 unmarked police cars, a security arrangement facilitated by Judge Harmon himself, who had been troubled by certain aspects of the case file. They entered through a secure basement entrance, avoiding the media circus that had formed at the courthouse steps. Jackson Pierce, however, had chosen a different approach. He arrived in his custom Bentley, stepping out to face the wall of cameras with practiced confidence. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, he projected the image of a concerned father, wrongfully separated from his beloved child. "I'm simply here to bring my daughter home," he told the reporters, his voice calibrated to convey restrained emotion. "These baseless accusations are a desperate attempt by my estranged wife to avoid the consequences of having abandoned our family 3 years ago. All I want is what's best for Lily." Inside the courtroom, final preparations were underway for the closed hearing. Judge Mariana Harmon, known for her no-nonsense approach to family court matters, had cleared her docket for the day, recognizing the complexity of the case before her. When Jackson entered with his legal team, 4 attorneys from one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms, he scanned the room with predatory focus, his expression changing almost imperceptibly when he spotted Eleanor sitting at the opposite table. For 3 years he had convinced himself she was gone forever, perhaps even dead. Yet here she was, composed and determined, a living refutation of the narrative he had constructed. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, something passed between them, a current of recognition, of battles fought and still to come. Eleanor did not look away. Minutes later, a side door opened, and Lily entered with Caroline and a court-appointed guardian ad litem. The child hesitated when she saw her father, her step faltering. Caroline placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and Lily drew herself up straighter, continuing to the table where her mother waited. Jackson half rose from his seat, his face a mask of paternal concern. "Lily," he called softly. "Come here, sweetheart." Judge Harmon's voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Pierce, please be seated. These proceedings will be conducted with appropriate decorum." With a tight smile, Jackson complied, though his eyes never left his daughter. The hearing began with opening statements from both legal teams. Jackson's lead attorney, Patricia Winters, painted a picture of a devoted father, blindsided by his wife's abandonment, who had spent years creating a stable, nurturing environment for his traumatized daughter, only to have her kidnapped by the very woman who had abandoned her, aided by an imposter with a history of professional misconduct. Richard Calloway's presentation offered a starkly different narrative. a controlling husband who had forced his wife from their home when she attempted to leave an emotionally abusive situation, a man who had used his wealth and influence to erase her existence and maintain absolute control over their child through fear and isolation. Your Honor, Richard concluded, this case is fundamentally about power and its misuse. Mr. Pierce has leveraged his considerable resources not to protect his child, but to possess her, and to punish his wife for daring to challenge his authority. The first witness called was Dr. Caroline Bennett, who took the stand and calmly acknowledged her true identity. Yes, Your Honor, I obtained employment in the Pierce household under false pretenses. I did so as part of a network that helps extract children from psychologically abusive environments when traditional systems fail them. And this network, Judge Harmon asked, operates outside the law? Caroline met her gaze steadily. We operate within the gray areas of the law, Your Honor. We document, we gather evidence, we build cases that can withstand legal scrutiny. When the courts eventually review our actions, as you are doing today, they find we've acted in the best interest of the child. She then methodically presented her observations of Lily's life in the Pierce mansion, the isolation, the rigid control, the punishment techniques, and most disturbingly, the incident with the dogs. Mr. Pierce locked his 3-year-old daughter in a kennel with 3 guard dogs as punishment for requesting oatmeal instead of eggs for breakfast, Caroline stated, her professional demeanor momentarily cracking. If that doesn't constitute emotional abuse, I don't know what does. Jackson's attorney objected vigorously, arguing that Caroline's testimony was that of a biased party who had committed multiple crimes, including identity fraud, breaking and entering and kidnapping. Judge Harmon overruled, noting that the court would take the circumstances into account when weighing the testimony, but would hear it nonetheless. Next came Robert, the elderly groundskeeper, who testified via video conference about the night Eleanor was removed from the property. His hands trembled as he recounted how security personnel had physically dragged her away as she fought to reach the nursery. She wasn't leaving, he insisted. She was being forced out. And the next day, Mr. Pierce had us all sign non-disclosure agreements with substantial penalties if we ever spoke about what happened. The court also heard from Dr. Vivian Reese, subpoenaed after the recording of her conversation with Jackson was entered into evidence. Visibly uncomfortable, she confirmed that she had agreed to diagnose Lily with a rare psychiatric condition without ever examining her, based solely on Jackson's description of behaviors that sounded remarkably like normal childhood imagination combined with grief over maternal separation. In retrospect, she admitted under cross-examination, I should have insisted on evaluating the child myself before discussing residential treatment options. Throughout these testimonies, Jackson remained outwardly calm, though those seated near him noticed his white-knuckled grip on the edge of the table. His attorneys objected frequently, challenging the admissibility of evidence obtained through Caroline's deception and arguing that Eleanor's disappearance for 3 years constituted abandonment regardless of the circumstances of her departure. Then came the moment everyone had been dreading. Judge Harmon called Lily to a private session in her chambers, accompanied only by the guardian ad litem and a court psychologist. Eleanor kissed her daughter's forehead before letting her go, whispering words of encouragement. Jackson watched, his jaw tight, as the child walked away without looking in his direction. Inside the judge's chambers, Lily sat in an oversized leather chair, her feet dangling above the carpet. Judge Harmon set aside her robes and sat across from her, creating a less intimidating environment. Lily, she began gently, I know this is a difficult day for you. I just want to ask you a few questions about your life with your dad and what happened when Ms. Caroline took you to see your mum. Can you tell me about that? The child's response was measured, articulate beyond her years. Daddy doesn't like mistakes, she explained. He says they show weakness. When I make them, I get punished. What kind of punishments? The judge asked. Lily described the incident with the dogs, but not as Caroline had presented it. In her telling, the animals had recognized something in her, something they understood and respected. They knew I was sad inside, she said simply. They wanted to help me feel better, but Daddy was angry that they didn't scare me. She went on to describe life in the Pierce mansion, the strict schedules, the silence, the feeling of always being watched. When asked about her mother, Lily's expression changed subtly. "Daddy said she left because she didn't want me anymore. But I knew that wasn't true. I could feel her watching over me." "What do you mean you could feel her?" Lily hesitated, glancing at the court psychologist before answering. "Mommy and I can sense things other people can't. Feelings, energies, animals understand us. Daddy doesn't like it. He says it's wrong, that we need to be fixed." When they returned to the courtroom, Lily went directly to Eleanor, climbing into her lap rather than returning to her designated seat. Judge Harmon made no comment on this breach of protocol. The final witness of the day was Eleanor herself. She took the stand with quiet dignity, facing her husband directly for the first time in 3 years. She testified about their relationship, how Jackson's need for control had gradually intensified, especially after Lily was born and began showing signs of the same intuitive sensitivity Eleanor possessed. He couldn't control it, couldn't understand it, she explained. And what Jackson can't control, he fears. What he fears, he seeks to eliminate. She described her planned escape, the confrontation when Jackson discovered her preparations, and the violent removal from her home. "I was told that if I tried to contact Lily or return to the property, he would have me committed to a psychiatric facility. He had already begun building a case against me, documenting what he called my unstable behavior and dangerous delusions." "And yet, you didn't pursue legal channels to regain custody," Jackson's attorney pointed out during cross-examination. "Why wait 3 years if your concerns for your daughter were so grave?" Eleanor's answer silenced the courtroom. "Because I had nothing, no money, no documentation, no proof of what had happened. Jackson had erased me, frozen my accounts, taken my identification, told everyone I'd abandoned my family. It took me 3 years to build a new identity, gather resources, connect with people who could help me, and document the evidence needed to fight someone with his power and influence." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "There wasn't a single day in those 3 years when I didn't think of Lily, when I didn't feel her presence across the distance. A mother knows when her child is suffering. I did what I had to do to save her." As the day's proceedings drew to a close, Judge Harmon addressed both parties. "I'll review the evidence presented today and continue with additional witnesses tomorrow. Until then, Lily will remain in the temporary custody of her mother, with supervised visitation for Mr. Pierce if he wishes." Jackson's objection was immediate and vehement. His attorney argued that this prejudiced the court against him before all evidence had been heard. Judge Harmon's response was measured but firm. "Mr. Pierce, the evidence presented today raises significant concerns about the child's emotional welfare in your care. This temporary arrangement prioritizes stability for Lily during these proceedings. My final ruling will be based on a comprehensive evaluation of all evidence and testimony." Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy had intensified as details of the day's testimony leaked out. Jackson pushed through the crowd without comment, his customary confidence noticeably diminished. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from board members, investors, and publicity handlers, all demanding explanations, threatening to withdraw support, distancing themselves from the emerging narrative of control and abuse. In the secure apartment, Eleanor tucked Lily into bed, the child finally succumbing to exhaustion after the emotional strain of the day. Caroline found Eleanor later, sitting alone by the window, tears streaming silently down her face. "You did well today," Caroline said softly, joining her. "The judge was clearly affected by your testimony." Eleanor wiped her tears. "It's not over. Jackson won't give up. He can't accept losing, especially not to me. The evidence is overwhelming. His reputation is in tatters. Even his legal team looked shaken by some of the testimony." "You don't understand," Eleanor whispered. "For Jackson, this isn't about Lily, not really. It's about winning, about maintaining the illusion of perfect control. He would rather destroy everything than admit defeat." Caroline's phone buzzed with an encrypted alert. Her expression grew serious as she read the message. "Security breach at the courthouse. Someone accessed the sealed records from today's proceedings. Eleanor's face paled. What does that mean? It means Jackson is making moves we didn't anticipate. We need to be prepared for anything tomorrow. Across town, in his penthouse, Jackson Pierce sat in darkness, reviewing the transcript that shouldn't have been available to him. His expression betrayed nothing as he reached for his phone and dialed a number few people possessed. "It's time for contingency plan B," he said without preamble. "Tomorrow, be ready." The voice on the other end hesitated. "Sir, given the current scrutiny, perhaps a less aggressive approach." "Tomorrow," Jackson repeated, his tone brooking no argument. "Everything is at stake now." As he ended the call, he moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, his wife and daughter were together, believing they had won, that justice was within reach. He allowed himself a cold smile. They had forgotten the most important lesson he had tried to teach them. In a world built on power, those who controlled the narrative controlled everything, and Jackson Pierce had no intention of losing control. The second day of the hearing dawned with an unexpected development. As Eleanor, Caroline, and Lily arrived at the courthouse through the secure entrance, they were met by Richard Calloway, his expression grave. Pierce's team filed a motion at dawn. They're claiming new evidence, psychiatric evaluations suggesting Eleanor has been manipulating Lily, coaching her testimony. They've submitted affidavits from 3 different psychiatrists claiming she exhibits signs of Munchausen by proxy. Eleanor's face drained of color. "That's absurd, I've never—" Richard held up a hand. "We know, it's a desperate tactic, but Judge Harmon has agreed to review the evidence before proceeding." He hesitated. "There's more. They've submitted a video allegedly showing you engaged in what they're calling ritualistic behavior with Lily and the animals at your Vermont property. They're claiming it's evidence of psychological manipulation or even cult-like activities." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "This is classic Jackson. When losing, change the battlefield entirely. He's trying to paint Eleanor as unstable, dangerous." "How did they even get such footage?" Eleanor asked, her voice shaking. "We were only at the farmhouse briefly." Caroline and Richard exchanged looks. "The extraction team that nearly caught us," Caroline said quietly. "They must have planted surveillance equipment after we left." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted palpably. Some of the court officers who had been respectful the previous day now kept a wary distance. Jackson sat at his table looking refreshed and confident. His legal team expanded by 2 additional attorneys, specializing in psychiatric testimony. Judge Harmon entered, her expression inscrutable. "Before we continue with scheduled testimony, I need to address the motion filed this morning by the respondent. Mr. Pierce's team has submitted what they claim is new and significant evidence bearing on Ms. Pierce's fitness as a parent." "Ms. Winters, please proceed." Patricia Winters rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we have obtained evidence that casts serious doubt on Ms. Pierce's mental stability and her influence over the child. With the court's permission, we would like to play a brief video recording obtained legally from the property where Ms. Pierce was residing." Despite Richard's objections about chain of custody and privacy violations, Judge Harmon allowed the video to be shown. The courtroom darkened as a screen descended. The footage, grainy but clear enough, showed Eleanor and Lily in a meadow behind the Vermont farmhouse. They sat in a circle with the 3 Belgian Malinois that had been removed from the Pierce estate. Eleanor appeared to be speaking softly, her hands moving in gentle patterns over the animals, who lay completely still. Lily mirrored her mother's movements. There was nothing overtly alarming about the scene, but presented in the context of alleged psychological manipulation, it took on a sinister cast. When the lights came back up, Patricia Winters introduced Dr. Maxwell Stevens, a psychiatrist specializing in cult deprogramming. "Dr. Stevens, based on your review of this footage and the case materials, what is your professional assessment of what we've just witnessed?" The doctor cleared his throat. "What we're seeing displays hallmarks of what we call shared psychotic disorder or folie à deux, where a delusional belief system is transmitted from one person to another, typically from a dominant personality to a more susceptible one, such as a child. Ms. Pierce appears to be inducting her daughter into ritualistic behaviors consistent with nature-based belief systems that often attribute supernatural qualities to animals. Richard was on his feet immediately. Objection! This expert is making wildly speculative claims based on a few minutes of ambiguous footage. There's nothing in that video that couldn't be explained as a mother and daughter, simply spending time with dogs. Your Honor, Patricia countered, Dr. Stevens has extensive experience identifying subtle signs of psychological manipulation. We've submitted his full analysis for the court's review, along with corroborating opinions from 2 other experts. Judge Harmon frowned. I'll allow the testimony, but with reservation. The court notes that this video shows no clear evidence of harm to the child. Dr. Stevens continued, outlining what he claimed were warning signs of reality distortion and magical thinking being encouraged in a vulnerable child. His testimony painted Eleanor as a woman so determined to maintain her daughter's loyalty that she was inducting her into a distorted worldview where animals had special powers and her father was positioned as an enemy. Richard's cross-examination was surgical. Dr. Stevens, have you ever personally evaluated either Eleanor or Lily Pierce? No, but have you spoken with any of Lily's previous caregivers about her development and behavior? I have not had that opportunity. Are you aware that Lily's connection with animals was documented long before her reunion with her mother, including the incident with the guard dogs at the Pierce estate? Dr. Stevens shifted uncomfortably. I read reports of that incident. Yes. And given that this connection predated any influence from her mother, doesn't that contradict your theory of transmitted delusion? Not necessarily. Children with heightened suggestibility often... Dr. Stevens, Richard interrupted, yes or no? Is it possible that what you're seeing in that video is simply a mother and daughter who share a natural affinity for animals spending time together in a perfectly innocent way? Technically possible, yes, but context suggests... Thank you, Doctor. No further questions. Despite this effective cross-examination, the damage had been done. Jackson's team had introduced doubt, a shadow over Eleanor's stability and judgment. During the lunch recess, Eleanor sat with her legal team, visibly shaken. He's trying to make me look crazy, just like he threatened years ago. Richard squeezed her hand reassuringly. It's a standard tactic when the facts aren't on their side. We still have our strongest witness coming up. That witness was Margaret, the former head housekeeper, who had agreed to testify despite the non-disclosure agreement she had signed. When court resumed, she took the stand with evident nervousness but firm resolve. Her testimony painted a devastating picture of life in the Pierce household, Jackson's controlling behavior, his emotional manipulation of Lily, the culture of fear he cultivated among the staff. After Mrs. Pierce was gone, it got worse, she explained. Mr. Pierce became obsessed with controlling every aspect of Lily's development. He monitored her constantly, punished any mention of her mother, and isolated her from normal childhood experiences. And the incident with the dogs? Richard prompted. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I've never seen anything like it. He locked that baby in with 3 guard dogs because she asked for oatmeal instead of eggs. When we found her hours later, the dogs were protecting her, not threatening her. It was as if they recognized something in her that needed safeguarding. Under cross-examination, Patricia tried to undermine Margaret's credibility by suggesting she had been fired for incompetence and was seeking revenge. Margaret remained unshaken. I retired after 32 years with the Pierce family. I stayed as long as I did because I was worried about what would happen to Lily without someone watching out for her. The momentum seemed to be shifting back in Eleanor's favor when Jackson's team called their surprise witness, Dr. Leanne Ward, the child psychologist who had evaluated Lily just that morning under court order. Eleanor felt a chill of apprehension. This testimony hadn't been on the schedule. Dr. Ward took the stand with professional confidence. Based on my evaluation, Lily Pierce exhibits signs of psychological manipulation consistent with parental alienation syndrome. She has been encouraged to view her father as threatening and dangerous, while developing an idealized, almost mystical connection with her mother. And in your professional opinion, Patricia asked, what environment would best serve Lily's psychological well-being at this time? Dr. Ward's answer sent a shockwave through the courtroom. Neither parent's home is ideal at present. Mr. Pierce's controlling behavior has created anxiety patterns in Lily, while Ms. Pierce appears to be encouraging potentially delusional thinking about special abilities and animal communication. I would recommend temporary placement in a neutral environment with continued therapeutic intervention for all parties. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Harmon called for order. Eleanor felt the floor dropping away beneath her. The possibility of losing Lily again, this time to the foster care system, was unthinkable. Richard immediately requested the opportunity to cross-examine, which was granted. Dr. Ward, you conducted your evaluation of Lily this morning. Is that correct? Yes, for approximately 2 hours. And in those 2 hours you were able to determine that she has been psychologically manipulated by both parents. I base my assessment on established protocols for identifying signs of... Dr. Ward, Richard interrupted. Are you aware that Lily demonstrated her unusual connection with animals long before reuniting with her mother? That multiple witnesses observed this ability during her time in her father's exclusive custody? I read those reports, yes. Then how do you explain this as maternal influence? Dr. Ward hesitated. The child could be reconstructing earlier experiences to align with her mother's belief system. Richard changed tactics. You recommended temporary placement in a neutral environment. Would you care to elaborate on what you mean by that? A therapeutic residential setting where Lily could receive specialized care while family relationships are recalibrated. A residential facility for a 6-year-old child who has already experienced significant trauma and separation from her mother. You believe institutionalizing her is in her best interest. Dr. Ward flushed. It would be a short-term placement while... No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Harmon called a brief recess to review the new testimony before final arguments. In the conference room, Eleanor was nearly hyperventilating. They're going to take her away from both of us. This is exactly what he wanted. If he can't have her, he'll make sure I don't either. Caroline placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Breathe, Eleanor. We prepared for this possibility. She turned to Richard. It's time for our final witness. Richard nodded grimly. I'll inform the judge. When court resumed, Richard addressed Judge Harmon. Your Honor, in light of the testimony from Dr. Ward, we request permission to call one final witness who can speak directly to Lily's well-being and the nature of her connection with her mother. This witness wasn't on your list, Counselor, Judge Harmon noted. No, Your Honor. The need for this testimony became apparent only after Dr. Ward's recommendation. After a moment's consideration, Judge Harmon nodded. The court will allow it. The door opened and Robert Wheeler entered, not the elderly groundskeeper who had testified via video, but a distinguished man in his 60s wearing a tweed jacket with elbow patches. Jackson stiffened visibly at the sight of him. Please state your name and qualifications for the court, Richard requested after the witness was sworn in. Dr. Robert Wheeler, I hold a PhD in developmental psychology with a specialization in parapsychology from Cornell University. I've spent 40 years studying children with heightened sensory perception and unusual empathic abilities. And what is your connection to this case? I've known Eleanor since she was a child. I worked with her parents to help them understand her unique sensitivities, particularly her connection with animals. When Eleanor contacted me 3 years ago after being separated from her daughter, I began documenting the case. Objection. Patricia was on her feet. This witness has a prior relationship with the petitioner. His testimony would be inherently biased. Your Honor, Richard countered, Dr. Wheeler's expertise is directly relevant to the court's understanding of what Dr. Ward has characterized as delusional thinking. His prior knowledge of similar traits in Eleanor provides crucial context. Judge Harmon considered briefly. I'll allow the testimony, but will weigh it accordingly. Dr. Wheeler proceeded to explain the concept of heightened empathic perception, a scientifically documented phenomenon where certain individuals demonstrate unusual sensitivity to emotional states, particularly those of animals. What Eleanor and Lily experience isn't mystical or delusional, he explained. It's an enhanced form of the same empathic capabilities we all possess to varying degrees. These individuals can detect subtle physiological and behavioral cues that Others miss, creating what appears to be almost telepathic communication with animals. And the behavior seen in the video recording, Richard asked, exactly what it appears to be, a mother teaching her daughter techniques for focusing and managing this sensitivity. The circular arrangement, the hand movements, these are centering exercises not unlike meditation practices. They help individuals with heightened perception avoid becoming overwhelmed by sensory input. Under cross-examination, Patricia tried to portray Dr. Wheeler as a fringe scientist, but his credentials and published research proved difficult to dismiss. When she suggested his long relationship with Eleanor compromised his objectivity, he responded with calm authority. I've documented similar abilities in hundreds of subjects over 4 decades. My interest in this case is both professional and humanitarian. I've seen children like Lily institutionalized, medicated and traumatized by well-meaning professionals who pathologize what they don't understand. As Dr. Wheeler was excused, Judge Harmon announced she would review all testimony before rendering her decision. She instructed both parties to return the following morning. That night in the Manhattan apartment, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She stood at the window watching the city lights, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. Caroline found her there shortly after midnight. "You should rest," she said gently. "Tomorrow will be difficult, regardless of the outcome." "I can't lose her again," Eleanor whispered. "I won't survive it." "You won't lose her," Caroline assured her. Dr. Wheeler's testimony was compelling, and Lily herself has made her preferences clear. But if the judge orders her placed in a facility, she won't. Harmon is thorough, but she's not blind to what's happening here. Jackson overplayed his hand with the psychiatric angle. Eleanor turned from the window. "When this is over, if we win, what happens to you?" Caroline smiled faintly. "I move on to the next case. There are more children who need help, more families torn apart by power and control. You'll stay in touch?" "Of course, but my role in your story is nearly complete. The rest of the journey belongs to you and Lily." The next morning, the courtroom was packed despite the closed nature of the proceedings. Word had spread about the high-profile custody battle, drawing court watchers and members of the press, who hoped to glimpse the participants. Jackson arrived looking uncharacteristically strained, the perfect facade finally showing cracks. Eleanor entered with Lily, both holding hands, both wearing simple blue dresses that emphasized their striking resemblance. Judge Harmon took the bench, her expression solemn. "Having reviewed all testimony and evidence in this case, I am prepared to render my decision regarding the custody of Lily Pierce." The courtroom fell silent. Eleanor squeezed Lily's hand. Jackson sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the judge. This case presents complex questions about parental rights, psychological well-being, and the best interests of a child caught between two very different worldviews. It also raises serious concerns about the use of wealth and influence to manipulate systems meant to protect our most vulnerable citizens. She looked directly at Jackson. "Mr. Pierce, the evidence shows a pattern of controlling behavior that prioritizes your desire for dominance over your daughter's emotional needs. The incident with the guard dogs alone demonstrates a disturbing lack of judgment and empathy." Turning to Eleanor, she continued, "Ms. Pierce, while the court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances that led to your separation from your daughter, your decision to pursue extra-legal means of reunification rather than working through established systems raises concerns about judgment." Judge Harmon then addressed both parents. However, the court's primary concern is Lily's welfare. The testimony of multiple witnesses, including household staff, psychological experts, and Lily herself, paints a clear picture of a child who thrived upon reuniting with her mother, despite the unorthodox circumstances of that reunion. She paused, looking down at her notes before continuing. Regarding Dr. Ward's recommendation for placement in a therapeutic facility, the court finds this suggestion not only excessive, but potentially harmful given Lily's history of separation trauma. Furthermore, the court is not persuaded that Lily's unique sensitivities constitute a psychological disorder requiring institutionalization. Jackson's hands gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Eleanor hardly dared breathe. Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that primary physical custody of Lily Pierce be granted to her mother, Eleanor Pierce, with Mr. Pierce receiving limited supervised visitation to be reassessed after completion of a court-approved parenting course and psychological evaluation. The judge fixed Jackson with a stern gaze. Additionally, the court orders the immediate unfreezing of all financial accounts belonging to Eleanor Pierce and the transfer of the Vermont property titled in both names solely to her name, as well as a financial settlement to be determined in subsequent proceedings. Judge Harmon's final words resonated through the courtroom. "Mr. Pierce, your resources have allowed you to control the narrative for 3 years, but money silences, truth only temporarily. And there are truths that speak clearly even when no one seems to be listening." With a sharp rap of her gavel, it was done. Eleanor gathered Lily into her arms, tears flowing freely. Jackson sat motionless, the reality of his defeat still sinking in. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor, Lily, and Caroline bypassed the media, frenzy through a private exit, where a car waited to take them to the airport. Their destination, the Vermont farmhouse that would now officially be their home. As they drove away, Eleanor looked back at the imposing courthouse one last time. "It's really over," she whispered. Caroline nodded. "A new chapter begins." In the back seat, Lily gazed out the window, her reflection overlaid on the passing city. "Can we get Phantom back now?" she asked. Eleanor smiled through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart, Phantom is waiting for us." Miles away, in Greenwich, Connecticut, Jackson Pierce returned to his empty mansion. The staff moved like shadows around him, already sensing the shift in power, already planning their departures. He walked through the silent halls, past Lily's untouched bedroom, past the spaces that had once been filled with Eleanor's presence. In his study, he poured himself a drink and stared at the space where Eleanor's portrait had hung. His phone buzzed continuously with calls from board members, from investors, from publicity handlers attempting to manage the damage to his reputation. He ignored them all. For the first time in his life, Jackson Pierce was facing a truth he couldn't control or manipulate. That power built on fear eventually crumbles. That wealth cannot purchase the connection he had scorned. That control is not the same as love. And as night fell over the mansion, he sat alone with this knowledge, surrounded by everything and nothing at all. 3 months later, a small farmhouse in rural Vermont buzzed with quiet activity. The autumn leaves painted the surrounding hills in brilliant oranges and reds. In a meadow behind the house, Eleanor sat with Lily, both of them cross-legged in the grass, surrounded by the 3 Belgian Malinois who had found their home there. Nearby, a white horse grazed contentedly. Dr. Wheeler sat on the porch, documenting their interaction as part of his ongoing research. Caroline visited occasionally, always bringing news of other children helped, other families healed. Life had found a new rhythm. Mornings spent with homeschool lessons, afternoons exploring the woods and fields, evenings filled with stories and laughter. The legal battles continued in the background, Jackson fighting the financial settlements, attempting to expand his visitation rights, launching appeals that were systematically rejected. But these were distant concerns, bureaucratic details that couldn't touch the peace they had found. Today, Lily was showing Eleanor something new. A butterfly had landed on her outstretched palm and remained there, wings gently opening and closing. "She says the first frost is coming," Lily explained, her voice soft with wonder. "She's flying south tomorrow." Eleanor nodded, unsurprised by her daughter's translation. "Then we should wish her a safe journey." Together, they whispered their good wishes to the delicate creature, who lingered a moment longer before taking flight, rising on the autumn breeze until it disappeared into the endless blue sky. Lily watched it go, her unusual eyes reflecting the vastness above. "Do you think Daddy is still angry?" she asked suddenly. Eleanor considered her answer carefully. "I think your father is learning some difficult lessons. Learning can be painful, but it's how we grow." "Will I see him at Christmas like the judge said?" "Yes, if that's what you want." Lily nodded solemnly. "I do. He's alone now. Like you were when he took me away." She turned her wise eyes to her mother. Maybe he can learn to listen instead of control. Eleanor marveled at her daughter's capacity for compassion, even toward the man who had caused them such pain. Maybe he can, she agreed, though she harbored private doubts. They stayed in the meadow until sunset, communicating in the silent language they shared, surrounded by creatures who understood them in ways humans rarely did. As twilight descended, they walked hand in hand back to the farmhouse, its windows glowing with warm light, a beacon of safety in the gathering darkness. Inside, a meal waited. Books lay open on comfortable chairs, photos hung on walls, new memories being created to fill the 3-year void. This was home, not a showcase of wealth and power, but a sanctuary of understanding and acceptance. And as night fell over the Vermont hills, mother and daughter sat by the fireplace, Lily nestled against Eleanor's side, the dogs arranged protectively around them. They had no need for words. In the silence, they shared a truth that Jackson Pierce, for all his resources, would never comprehend: that the most profound connections require not control, but surrender, not power, but vulnerability, not fear, but love. Outside their window, the stars emerged one by one,